co-founder and CEO of TeamLease Regtech. On behalf of everyone at TeamLease, I would like to welcome you for yet another discussion on digitizing compliance management for greater control. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting three panelists as guests who between them bring close to 60 years of compliance management experience. You heard me right. It's about 60 years or 6 decades of compliance management experience between them. They come from some of the fastest growing sectors in our economy, and I'll bring some data points on their sectors as we move along. They deal with the groans and pains of growing every day as they expand their footprint in the country, set up more entities, take on larger projects, spread across multiple states. They deal with licenses, registrations, and permissions. They deal with returns, registers, and challans, and they face problems and challenges on a day-to-day basis. Today, we have a pleasure of hosting all of them. Let me quickly introduce our panelists for the day. Let me start with Mr. Raghunath Rath. Mr. Raghunath Rath is a senior legal professional with rich in-house general counsel experience of over 20 years. He has worked with many large multinational companies across India. He's currently working as the head of legal and compliance and company secretarial function for Alcon Laboratories. Mr. Rath has in-depth experience in healthcare sector with almost 14 years of his work in pharmaceutical as general counsel and compliance officer for the India operation. So you can guess that he brings deep and rich understanding of compliance management in India. He has worked with companies such as AstraZeneca, Hospira Healthcare, Pfizer, Endo Pharma, among others, and has handled commercial contracts, corporate governance, ethics, and compliance management, among other legal and risk management projects. Welcome, Raghunath. Our next participant today on the panel is Parth. Mr. Parth Shah is the CFO and company secretary of RKC Infrabuilt Pvt. Limited. He's also the chairman of Legal Committee of Gujarat Contractor Association. My one-on-one discussions with Mr. Parth have been very exciting. He has done a lot of good work in the area of ease of doing business in the state of Gujarat. Over the last 11 years of organic experience, he's grown bottom up in all aspects of infrastructure industry, has been a pioneer in shaping the group's strategic focus, organic growth, and currently leads many large functions. He leads finance, tax, legal, regulatory compliance, automation, digitization, ERP, and so on and so forth. He's completed his degree in CA, CS, MCom, and MA Politics with the National University ranks. Welcome, Parth.
Thank you.
The next panelist that we have today is Mr. Vikash Gupta. Vikash is a chartered accountant with over 20 years of rich experience in internal audit, risk and compliance across insurance, consulting, and banking domain. He currently works with Canada HSBC Life Insurance, has been there for almost 9 years, and heads their compliance and internal audit functions. He's worked with reputed companies and in the corporate roles in the past, including ICICI Bank, KPMG, EY, and ICICI Prudential Life Insurance. He's also a qualified certified systems information systems auditor and has completed its CPA US professional examination. So welcome, Vikash. Thank you so much for joining in. So let's kick off the discussion today. If I can bring the size and complexity of India's regulatory environment for you, which can act as our starting point for our dialogue, and we take it from there. What you see on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, is India's compliance universe. Indian entrepreneurs and employers deal with 1,536 unique acts and rules across the law of the land. Among them, there are 69,233 unique compliances with about 6,618 filings across central, 28 states, and 9 union territories. If you look at this universe, it's largely broken down into 7 categories. Labor being the largest, contributes about 30% in terms of acts, 47% in terms of compliance, and our recent report titled Jail for Doing Business found out that 68% of total criminality of 26,134 items in country, they are contributed by the labor laws. There are other categories including environment, health and safety, finance and taxation, commercial, secretarial, and then sectoral or industry specific regulators. Don't want to go into the lower level detail of this, but let me take a second and show you the regulatory complexity heat map of India. What you see in front of you is a heat map of the compliance burden on entrepreneurs put by various states. This talks about the division of 69,233, of which about 43,000 odd compliances are at the state level, and central contributes, or union government contributes, about 25,000. Moving on to the quick next slide. When we talk about compliance, just making sure all of us are on the same page, we are referring to statutory compliances, which includes all kinds of licenses, registrations, permissions, consent orders, returns, registers, challans, payments, remittances, displays, notices, and many other items that are part of the universe. So with this, let me start our conversation today. Bring in who comes from the state of Gujarat. Parth is currently with RKC, has seen the length and breadth of compliance complexity. So Parth, bringing you into the conversation, infrastructure is a happening sector in India. In 2021 alone, over 5.5 lakh crore was spent on infrastructure. 7.5 lakh is committed, which is a 35% increase in this year. India owns the second largest road network. We have built about 13,000 kilometers of road, and year on year, the numbers are only growing. As an infrastructure focused company who is in roads, you work on many different projects, each one of them in a different geographical location. And I'm sure you deal with the complexity of compliance like not a whole lot of people outside. I want to bring you into the conversation, understand your view on the complexity of compliance from your perspective in your sector. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you, Rishi. So, insofar as the compliances are concerned, there are various central acts like GST, income tax, which have a dedicated website, which have a library directory of notification circulars, etc. But when we go to the sector-specific regulatory compliances, there are hundreds and thousands of compliances which are not available online. So first thing is the states do not have a dedicated online portal or a library which at least portrays as, yes, these are our laws, these are our notifications, these are our circulars, number one. Second, insofar as the clarifications are concerned, so it is way ambiguous, and probably they like to keep it that way. So being into business, we believe that there is no room for an excuse that it is not available, it was tough, it was difficult. There's no excuse. I mean, because the cost is way too high. You know, so I just, out of my genuine experience, the cost of avoidance is almost 1,000 times less than the cost of cure, insofar as when you are working at a scale of business like us. So what we do is we research each and every regulatory compliance insofar as our sector is concerned in every state. We make sure we have an in-house portal kind of thing with all the bare acts, notices, everything, from notifications to circulars and everything. We say no to 4 things like people-driven, no; Google research, no; manual, offline, desktop based, yes, all these things are a complete no-no for us. So we believe in, or rather we should be system driven. The compliance management should be online. The compliance management should be browser based. It should be accessible on a mobile app. It should never be a result of a Google search. It should always be from the direct bare act, and then otherwise we have seen very minor, like a comma or full stop can also change the interpretation, and the cost of compliance is very high. So out of years of experience, and out of going through so many things, we have concluded on this thing that we need to have a compliance management tool and dedicated team. See, in general, the compliance is a non-core activity. So the promoters or the businessmen, they will feel like it's a non-revenue generating activity. Second, you are asking them to pay taxes. You are asking them to do so much other thing. So obviously it is irritating for any promoter or businessman, but as we can see, the income tax rate, say for example, I'll just give you a very broad number that it is ranging from 25 to 45%. So they are just like our partners. A partner can have their stake. GST rate is from 5 to 12 to 28%. So for example, if there is a non-compliance and the interest or penalty, or or even you have bid something based on an assumed rate, and then the rate is something different. So these are not even the margins are not even close to the difference of rate in GST. So it is a huge burden, and while still it is a non-core activity, it is a non-revenue generating activity, but the non-compliance of which can affect your entire business, the non-compliance of which is a huge cost, and it's a cost through which you can do 2-3 other projects. So if you just look at the opportunity cost that you lose, I'll just share you a couple of incidents if I have enough time, Rishiji. Yeah, so a small incident without naming the promoter. So as we are all aware that tax terrorism is a real thing in India, and not just tax, but all other kind of regulatory compliances. So the bureaucrats exploit and abuse the provisions. So there is no scope that we should be lagging behind insofar as compliance is concerned. Say various, I've got representations from various people. There is a provision of 276B in Income Tax Act, which literally prosecutes the promoters for a procedural delay by your junior level tax executive or an accountant who just forgot to pay tax on time. Then you paid with interest, and still after 8 years you are being prosecuted under a vague provision. So this is the level of criminality, and this is the level of abuse that can happen. Now either we reach on the top and change the rules, but till then we should be very we should have tens of reminders. We should have backup. We should have, it should not be people driven. If an accountant is absent or is not available on time, it should not affect the ease of doing business for the promoters. So we have seen various such cases. Being in the Contractors Association, we hear and we get so many representations from our members that these are the kind of issues that we are facing. And what I could gather from various bureaucrats is that it is very easy for them. It has become a fashion that we put a negative order and then let the court decide. So they are burdening the judiciary with frivolous cases. And what is the maximum exposure that a bureaucrat can have? It is only a reprimand, small reprimandation from the honorable courts, nothing more than that. But you, on the other hand, or companies like us, on the other hand, will see financial losses, direct, indirect, are one thing. Your opportunity cost is a very huge thing which many people miss out. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that there is at this juncture there is no other option. You have to be 100% compliant.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Parth, for bringing in a very different perspective. And we'll talk about the solutions in our latter part of the presentation and discussion today. Let me bring Vikash into the conversation. Vikash comes from the infrastructure sector. The sector has seen an impressive growth of close to 20% year on year. Contributes about 7% to the GDP. There are about 58 insurance companies, 34 non-life insurers. The sector is going to see a tremendous explosive growth as the penetration of the sector improves. Now, companies like his, which is Canara HSBC Life Insurance, are also benefiting from this growth. He's been with the company for 9 years. Vikash, bring in the perspective of what does it take to expand, grow the insurance company? What are the regulatory compliances that you deal with? And how do you go about dealing with? What are the challenges?
Thanks, Rishi, and thanks for the introduction also. Uh, in terms of when I come from life insurance industry, because it's a part of the financial services, it brings its own complexity because considering it involves public money, and definitely that brings the wholesome responsibility on the government, the regulator who was basically regulating us, to ensure that we are basically complying to the regulation and ensures that the necessary money is safe of the customers. So when you talk about compliances, like I think the length and breadth Rishi already shown in terms of how many compliances if you need to operate in India you need to get through. I was just doing some maths. Okay, how many reporting I do in a year? So like, like 1500 reportings maybe we are doing for various purposes. Our principal regulator is IRDA, but that is a core regulator. But definitely we are also governed by SEBI, RBI, Financial Intelligence Unit, PFRDA, which is a pension regulator, and definitely Aadhaar regulator, which is UIDAI. And I can, so we have all, our main is Insurance Act 1938, and we're governed through letters, as Parth was saying. We receive letters, we receive circulars, we receive guidelines, we receive regulations, and so on and so forth. And what is happening is basically with the recent changes, as India is moving towards a digital economy, definitely the compliances need to be embedded in the digital processes, into the processes, if we really need to be complied. Because days have gone by where basically in the past we used to say, okay, if the returns have been filed, if some calculations are done on the month end and all those things, the periodicity have changed. I think the periodicity has become continuous compliance instead of a periodic compliance. So that is the first challenge which is coming up. Secondly, what happens, considering we definitely also attract money from outside India. So lots sort of compliances which are applicable may not be directly applicable to Indian companies. Say for example, to a GDPR, to a anti-bribery corruption, and so on, so forth. Also basically comes into the picture. So that becomes a second basically major complexity for us in terms of international compliances also. Third, definitely from perspective, if you look at my company especially or any other company, mostly having in India, the life insurance or a general insurance company having a tie-up from the multinational companies, which are generally promoter, foreign promoters. So the compliances of the law of land from that particular country is becomes much more important. And third is financial. Fourth is basically the financial regulations, which is other than your normal laws, basically in terms of your how you prepare balance sheet, how you prepare handle. Even if IFRS is not applicable as of now in our country, but you need to comply with this. So that is something I think is a complexity. It's a huge things which you have to comply. And I think the biggest challenge which we feel is how we get digitized in terms of being compliant at every second, every minute, every transaction which we do. So that's the challenge which we have. And secondly, as Parth was saying, the interpretation is open to challenges. Again, you interpret in a manner which is business driven, but definitely the person sitting on the other side will interpret in a different manner. So that is also a challenge how you principally agree and do that. So the complexity which brings is basically our role as a compliance officer, how you interpret it and how you interpret right, so that tomorrow your company is also not exposed to unnecessary risk and which can lead into penal provision and, as you were saying, something a criminal liability also in certain cases. So this is something I want to put forward. This is what I see as a complexity, because there's a regulation for everything, be it a distributor, be it a product which you need to launch, be it basically even a small, even a person of MD or anybody we want to appoint, even in terms of the salary which we pay to them. So there's so many compliances which are there all over the place. So that is the complexity which we face on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent. Just one additional question here. I know you have over 100 branch network in the country. Every time you have to grow and start another branch, there are a number of compliances at a branch level, number of new licenses and registrations. What do you think of that? How does it add to
that is
complexity?
Yeah, that is one of the points I think I missed. Thanks for highlighting that. So we have we are going to have more than 100 branches in this year. So definitely each state and the relationship of the each state with the center both plays a big role actually. So in terms of who will share the stamp duty, who will share the GST, and so on. These are from a revenue side, but definitely from the other side, from a shops and establishment to a labor to a maternity and putting on the board There's a labor commissioner who will come and inspect you. There's somebody will come and inspect you, and taking care of this at 100 places. And plus, considering it's a money involved like in a company, I can tell you, our CEO can get a non-billable warrant issued any part of the country any day. So that is the level of complexity which we live in. Somebody said, okay, there's a fraud happened to me, and the money has been taken out from our account for life insurance policy. And if the local administrator or the local court believes, okay, that's a true case, they can issue a non-bailable warrant, and the police will be standing here to arrest the person. So that is one of the examples I can tell you which happens. I tell you an interesting case what happened in one of the organizations. So there's an inspection which happened by the regulator. And the regulator find it out, okay, you made some excess payouts which was outside the things to your distributor. Next day, the service tax team was there to seal the office, saying that you have not paid service tax on that. So can you believe the complexity? One side, the company is saying, okay, did I pay extra? By the same time, there's a service tax department sitting there who is saying, boss, you have paid extra. Now you pay my service tax because this is service. If you have paid as a remuneration, it's a service taxable item. Why didn't pay to me? So that's a complexity with them, and definitely there are pressure in the governments also to increase the revenue. So that they are looking at the opportunities to increase the revenue from everywhere.
No, totally understand. And we recently did a report. I'm not sure if you got a chance to read it, but for the benefit of our audience, I do want to let them know that there is a report titled "Jailed for Doing Business," which we recently launched in collaboration with Observer Research Foundation, which finds that among the 69,233 unique compliances across the law of the land, 26,134, which is practically 2 out of every 5 compliances, can send an entrepreneur to jail. These items go up to 10 years of imprisonment. 68% of them come from labor, but there is an additional 32% which don't come from labor. There are procedural lapses which can technically send an entrepreneur to jail, including failure to whitewash the inner walls of your latrines, which are used by your labor or contractors, is an example of one such compliance. So totally understand where you're coming from, Vikas. Thanks for bringing that perspective. And I think we have Raghunath ji. He's been experiencing some technical difficulty. Raghunath ji comes from the pharmaceutical sector of the country, another very, very promising sector where India ranks 3rd in the pharmaceutical production by volume. We're also the largest supplier of generic medicines across the world. 20% of the world's generic supply comes from India. We are home to about 3,000 plus pharmaceutical companies, a very, very strong network with over 10,500 manufacturing facilities, contribution of about $24 billion to our GDP. So an extremely promising industry out there. And as I said during introduction, Raghunath ji brings over 20 years of experience. I still think he is continuing to have some technical difficulty. Raghunath ji, can you hear us? I guess not. Let me...
Rishi ji, yeah.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, if you can pick up the question. The complexity of compliance in management of pharmaceutical companies.
Yes, thank you. And good afternoon all. I think my very, very sincere apology to all of the attendee plus participant here. I've been probably the worst network connection today. I don't know. Zoom is always a little challenge, WebEx and Teams are supportive to me or my system, but I've been, automatically it is on, I'm speaking, it is throwing me out, and again, it is bringing me back to this. So this is what happened.
No worries at all. I think we've lost him again. Parth, you wanted to add something?
Yes. So as Vikash ji was speaking on, the branch level compliances every time they open a branch, just imagine the infrastructure companies. First, if we can imagine, what all sort of kind of setups that go into when you set up a new manufacturing unit. You need to apply for the land, then the environment clearance, if at all forest is required, forest clearance, then land acquisition, then various other sectoral, then establishing the plants, mechanical fitness certificate, and then pollution control board and everything. Now infrastructure, so it is a whole, generally when you establish a new manufacturing unit, it takes about 6 months to 1 year minimum based on the kind of scale that you're working on. But infrastructure companies, they face this day in and day out. Say, for example, we are doing a roughly 2,000 crore project, and it will be over in 1.5 years. So the entire setup that we did in one point at one location, we have to dismantle it again and go somewhere else, find another land and set up the whole thing again. Again, all those clearances, pollution control board, environment, forest, everything, mining, and mining laws are extraordinary because they deal with natural resource. They are so highly penalized that even if you forget, as you rightly said, so even if you forget a procedural thing like filing of a return of mines extracted, one thing can lead to another, and ultimately it can result into prosecution. So the infrastructure business is a promising business, large scale business, but it is also highly challenging only due to one thing, that it is geographically diversified, and you do not get many people who are ready to move away from their families and hop on from one project to another project and throughout the length and breadth of the country. So it becomes a way more challenging for infrastructure companies to survive or grow in this scenario. Yeah.
One additional challenge that we have encountered working with large infrastructure company, because as you know, we help over 1,500 entities across the length and breadth of India transform and manage their compliance. And of course, many infrastructure companies are a part of our customer portfolio. One key challenge is for infrastructure companies, every time they have to do a new project, they end up creating a special purpose vehicle or a joint venture or a new entity. So what ends up happening is, for a similar amount of revenue, a manufacturing company is likely to have one entity and then many plants underneath, whereas an infrastructure company ends up having as many entities as the number of projects in a lot of instances. So the secretarial compliances, the company law compliances, in case of a listed company, the entire SEBI compliances, finance and tax compliances, they become a lot more complicated. You are dealing with more registration, more licenses, greater number of returns, greater number of registers, and so on and so forth. So I think just the sheer numbers in terms of quantity is way too high.
In just one more thing to highlight is that the SPV only receives 2 installments of revenue in the entire year. It is the concession agreement is drafted that way, that we receive only 2 annuities. So there are only 2 tax invoices, but that for that you have to get the GST number, you file all the monthly returns and everything. I mean, from all the regulatory compliance they apply to all the SPVs also. Yeah.
And one additional point on infra companies, there are 2 phases to the life cycle of a project. One is during construction and second is post-construction. If you're also doing the maintenance in a build, operate, transfer kind of a model,
yeah.
There's a clean switch between construction-oriented compliances to ongoing compliances and so on. So I think the complexity cannot be.
So it is not highly complex in that manner. It is not even very tough to do that, but it just increases your processes, your procedural aspects to a lot of levels. So clerical.
And imagine multiplying that by 20 projects or 40 projects as we move forward. The sheer number of compliances will make sure that in spite of best intentions and efforts, you still end up missing a few.
Right. Correct.
Good. So I think Raghunath ji is still not back, and we'll hope that we can hear him talk today. But in the meantime, we are about 29 minutes into the conversation. I have 101 participants live on this webinar today. So we are being watched right now by 101 compliance professionals. So which is great. Audience, thank you so much. I want to bring you into the conversation now. There is just a battery of about 8 or 9 questions that we have put together as a part of a survey. I would request our organizing team to bring up a survey. Vikash and Parth, I do request you also to take this quick poll. Helps us gather the view of the audience. So I hope that all of you are able to see the survey questions on your screens.
Yes, but apparently it shows hosts and panelists cannot vote. So
if our organizing team can help hosts and panelists also to vote, that would be lovely. And I do request all the audience, one and all, to help us get your view. We would really appreciate it. We'll just take another 40-50 seconds to answer all these questions. Many people have already completed taking the survey. I'll keep the survey open for another 30 seconds. Request you all to submit. And I just want to remind everyone that there is a Q&A section here. In case you have any questions for any one of our panelists and participants, please put in your question there. And as soon as we end our regular conversation, I will answer all the easy questions and pass on all the difficult ones to Vikash and Parth. So in last 10 seconds, please. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Abhay, I request you to end the survey now. We'll share the results towards the later part of our discussion. All right, Raghunath ji, I see you back. I hope you can hear us well. We've lost a little bit of time, but would you like to come in and give us a quick view of the compliance challenges from your perspective? Okay, I think we are still experiencing some technical challenges with him. Let me move on to the next phase of our dialogue today. Vikash, this time I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, Rishi, sorry to interrupt. I think Raghunath ji can hear us now. Maybe if you could.
Okay, Raghunath ji, I'm assuming that you can hear me well. Would you like to have a quick word on compliance challenges from your past experience in the pharmaceutical sector? You're speaking on mute. We can't hear you. You're speaking on mute.
So, known technical barrier, unknown barrier, and the incident. This is what I would summarize today's incident, but very sincere apology. Yeah, so now I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. So I think, yeah, so coming from, pharma industry, if I say the why and what, and when it comes to the difficulty part, why it is, compliance is more required. I think everyone know company law, various anti-corruption law, tremendous number of amendments, new enactment, all the statistics you have already, told. So basically everyone knows.
I think the network is not helping us with Mr. Raghunath today. Let me move on to the next portion of our conversation today, because I was going to bring you in first. We know compliance management is complex, right? There are thousands of compliances that a company deals with. Cost of poor compliance has gone up over the years. Cost of compliance was always high. I think Parth mentioned a few statistics around cost of compliance. Cost of poor compliance today is high as well. 2 out of 5 compliances can send an entrepreneur to jail. In the middle of all of this, how do you keep your company compliant? What are the practices? Share some good practices, best practices. What has been working well for you over the years? What would you advise our audience today?
Okay. Thanks, Rishi, for the question. So definitely, I think we explained the problem at the first half an hour, right? I think the solutions definitely are, if I say the solutions are always static, no. Definitely there are, we have transformed ourselves from maybe a manual paper-driven compliances to sort of getting into a digital and automating compliances. So why it is required also, I'll tell you what I'm recently noticing also. with the change in definitely in the current government or current regime, if you talk to the secretary level people or the people who are chair of your regulatory body, definitely they're looking in terms of you can say doing away with the over regulation, but at the same time, and they're giving you empowerment. But when they give you empowerment, definitely at the back of the pocket they keep with themselves the power to penalize you and the power to basically to more reprimand you for something goes wrong. So that makes the things more challenging, right? If somebody is there, like if somebody is telling, okay, did you verify? If everybody is verifying your things on a day-to-day basis, it becomes easier for you to, because the correction is also easier, right? So correction becomes much more difficult. Things are getting dynamic with the digital economy, with the fintechs, with the insurtechs, and all those things which are coming. And definitely with the type of complexity of transactions which we are getting into, right? Earlier we used to take, okay, I still remember I used to go in a ring with my father to take a stock transaction. Okay, he used to say to the broker, please buy. Now we basically buy stocks on our handheld devices, and that includes derivatives also. So this is becoming real time. So definitely when I divide my regulations. Say, I, being a chartered accountant, I always see from financial angle also. So I say it's a balance sheet and a P&L, right? So balance sheet is there, like when you have to do anything, that is something is always applicable till the time your basically company is in existence. But how you remember it, right? Today with the attrition and all those things are changing so fast, you can't depend on your people. So definitely you have to automate those things. Okay, something, a new product need to be launched, a checklist should come out from the automated software. Okay, this has to be done. This has to be done to launch a new product. Maybe something was regulated in 2010, something may be regulated in 2019, some circular has come in 2022 also. So you have to comply with all the three regulations. When I talk about P&L, I talk about, okay, see, we all have, I think, gone through a difficult phase of COVID. And definitely a lot of new regulations came for a shorter period of time, especially in the insurance space, which existed with the expiry date. So that's why I call a P&L, like comes in a year and goes back, right? And after a year, you need not to follow. So sometimes when we talk about compliance burden, are we overdoing it? So this is also right example. Are we kept on doing the things which are not supposed to be done? So how? Definitely automation will help us, because when you put a end date, right, you automatically the automatic tools will tell you, okay, this is done and you need not to follow. This is the second thing which I am doing. Third, definitely from a people perspective, when I see break everything, I break into three things: people, process, and technology, right? So people perspective, definitely tone at the top is the most important thing. Definitely considering Canara and HSBC being our shareholder, we have a right tone at the top. That's not a challenge for, at least for our company, especially for the other regulatory entities also. And third is a continuous monitoring. So one, I've spoken about the tone at the top. Second, I talk about automation. Third, I talk about digitization of the compliance itself. You have to embed the compliance requirements within the process. If you wait for the outcome that, oh, by chance they will do compliant way, definitely you're taking too many chances. So you have to embed the compliance requirement within the process, because it's a fast changing market. It is there. Transactions are happening in a split of seconds, right? And you have to ensure compliance also in that split of second. So till the time you don't embed that into a process, it becomes very difficult. This is the way we do. We currently do a sort of semi-automatic way of compliances at a quarter end. See, one is continuous monitoring, second is on a periodic basis, how we do it. So some of the requirements you cannot do automate, right? Also, like advertisement filing, you launch advertisement, you have to do a reporting and all those things. So what we have done, we have implemented a system, which is, so I'll say in front of Rishi, is currently semi-automated. So basically where we insert all the compliances, and definitely it helps us from a process flow perspective to roll up all the compliance at the quarter end, semi-annual, and year end, where we stand in terms of the compliances which we need to gather. So this is how we manage, and definitely we're looking forward for a much automated system, which will make us in peace completely from a semi-automated to automated. So that is the way I can see very clearly we can manage. Is tone at the top, embed the compliance into the process. Third, automate the whole regulatory requirement, because it's difficult to manage both balance sheet and P&L type of compliances together in a particular scheme, and with the high attrition, a lot of people changing. So you have to do away with the people thing completely. So this is what is Rishi, I think actually.
So Vikash, totally agree with you. Tone at the top is by far the most important thing. If the executives, the leadership, the management don't care about compliances, their understanding of the obligations of compliances and the frequently changing regulatory environment, believe it or not, and you'll find it on our website, there are over 3,500 regulatory changes in a year. that affect Indian entrepreneurs, right? And depending on which sector are you in, the number of applicable changes can vary. But typically, we have seen an MSME pharma company, and I wish Raghunath ji was here, deals with about 600 regulatory changes in a year, right? So there's no way the 3 regulatory changes that you're dealing with on a daily basis for, for the rest of your life is not easy to manage. So tone at the top helps you embark on the right systems which can embed processes. I think that's a wonderful point you make, that you cannot have processes and systems in isolation of each other. They have to come and get married. Processes have to be implemented via systems in order for you to have any decent chance of compliance. So I think that's an important point you make. Totally agree with you. Parth, let me bring you into the conversation. We discussed that for a sector like yours, you deal with a lot more complexity around environment, health, and safety. You deal with a lot of mining-oriented regulations, depending on the nature of project that you're dealing with. While there are 2 incoming transactions, but there are many outgoing transactions. You're buying cement and steel and paying salaries and paying contractors all year long. There are a lot of different kind of labor compliances, Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act in 1970, and related rules become applicable to you because of the nature of work that you do. Your vendors are responsible for compliance. You become a principal in a lot of instances. How do you manage vendor compliances and so on? So I want to bring you in, get your perspective on this.
Right. So first thing that we started doing is we digitized each and every task or workflow that we wanted to do. Second, each and every record, whether it is going out of the company or coming into the company, has a unique identification number. We call it a DIN, document identification number. It passes through a portal. So basically keeps you track of all the correspondence happening in the entire organization. Third, we research a lot. So and through researches we go to the exact source of the true and authenticate source of the information. Say, for example, if we wanted to get a view of Gujarat Minor Mineral Concession Rules 2016. So we have the actual notification from a reputed source. I mean, either directly from the government or through a government-owned website, not through Google searches. So that is first thing that I banned from my organization is Google search. You can use for your fancy at your home, but insofar as your work is concerned, it has to be an authentic thing. So that is one thing. And then we have our own in-house portal in our server, which organizes and compiles all such, just like Taxman. We also use Taxman's portal. We also use SCC Online. So the portals which are available easily online through a paid subscription, we do that. But other than that, those which are not available, we develop on our own. We develop on our own. And the compliance management tool, why is it important? Is it helps you prioritize. See, since there are a lot of compliances, so the things which are not supposed to be done should not be done. The things which are supposed to be done by your colleagues or your assistants, it should be done by them only. And things which are to be done later on. So you have to do that. So if you have a dashboard of what is the upcoming compliance that you need to do, or what are the upcoming tasks, and it is a date-wise, month-wise, quarter-wise, or a timeline chart kind of thing. So it helps you prioritize. Sometimes we or any person, they start working on a thing which is due after 2 months, and the thing which is due after 1 week is left untouched. So dashboard and compliance tools, they with user rights credentials and the rights management, they help you prioritize. So that is what we are doing, and it is a never-ending. See, improvisation is a never-ending tool. So we keep on improvising ourselves. We keep on updating, upgrading. We keep on searching for better platforms, better how we can improve on whatever our existing systems are. And one more thing, which I would suggest to anyone, is having different portals for different workflows or compliances or any other work that you to do. Is sometimes it is not it is not at all beneficial sometimes, because when you do not log in all those different portals that you own, then again it is a job half done or job not done. So basically, if any organization, it is beneficial that in a single sign-on, they should be able to, the relevant person should have the relevant dashboard, the relevant based on his rights, based on his credentials, based on his work, his next task list is generated. So we are trying to collaborate and we are trying to bring as much as possible in a single platform. So that is what we are trying to do. Yeah.
Great. So it's very clear that technology systems, I think Vikash mentioned embedding processes within technology. It's a key element of institutionalizing systems and processes which can help a company stay compliant. I mean, that's a key message that our audience should take from here. Compliance is a journey, not a destination. Rules are changing every day. Parth mentioned hundreds of regulatory updates. I can give you some numbers. There are 2,233 websites in India which publish regulatory updates between union, state, and local bodies. I'll repeat that number, 2,233 unique websites. None of these have capability for subscription where you can say, here's what I'm interested in. Next time there's an update, send me an update. The onus is on an entrepreneur to go visit the web page. Typically, web page is not on the home page. It is embedded somewhere deep inside the website. Half the times when you click on the document, the circular, it has expired. It does not load. Sometimes it has been archived. So if you want to refer to an old document, you will not find it. So these are typical challenges of trying to comply. It's not about not intending to comply, even if you have the right intention. Sometimes these are challenges. So you need technology and systems that can help you stay on top of your compliance. As Parth mentioned, keep sending reminders unless the person does it. Absolutely agree with you. Hope is not a strategy. If you think and if you're hoping that some of your junior people who are not so highly paid are motivated to do all the compliances and are motivated to stay on top of all the regulatory updates, let me give you the bad news today. Unless you have a system which tells you in time that there are only 2 more days left in this particular compliance, which is critical, risk level is critical, because it can send, the non-compliance can send the entrepreneur to jail. Unless you know this well ahead of time, chances are your ability to intervene in time will not be there. So that's where some of these things become much larger than a breadbasket. For a company which is infrastructure in nature, or for that matter, a company that is dealing with hundreds of branches like what Vikash does and many state operations, there are so many shop acts to be renewed, there are so many registers to be maintained, there are so many different contractors to be dealt with, there are so many compliances which your vendors are accountable for which you end up becoming the principal. It's not even funny. So technology is the answer. World has moved on to technology. The developed world embraced technology first. You can see it in India, the rate at which we are digitalizing in our personal lives. We use portals for booking tickets. We use portals for entertainment. We use portals for hailing cabs. We use portals for ordering food. Technology has become deeply embedded into our lives. Our enterprise lives are no different. If we want to stay in control, if we want to have the transparency, we want to have an opportunity to comply, technology is going to play a vital role. With that said, I do request our audience to continue to put in the questions. I think, Vikash, there is a specific question for you. Let me read the question. Someone's asked,
I've seen that.
Can you pick up one challenging compliance out of the entire lot? So I know picking one can be difficult, but take a stab at it.
Yeah, I'll take a one only. I'll talk about cyber security regulations, I tell you, in terms of the compliance, because definitely with India getting prominent world over, we are basically facing so many cyber attacks which are on our prominent websites. So definitely the government is very serious about data security and cyber laws, right? So we have 2 particular regulations which deal with this particular scenario. One is investment regulation, second is cyber regulation itself, cybersecurity guidelines. And there the institute has, as Rishi was saying, just tell you some number. Institute of Chartered Accountants have made the checklist, which runs into 350 pages each for each of the regulations. which an organization need to ensure to comply. We can clear 350 points. And so, not sorry, it's 350 points each. And those actually get into a granular level, from segregation of duties to delegation of authority to system access to VAPT. If VAPT results are high, medium, low, what do you need to do? What do you need to do a web-facing application? What do you need to do internal-facing application? What do you need to do with the WAN application? So on and so forth, right? So, and what do you need to do with the infra? What do you need to do with the application? So that runs into pages. This is one of the things I can tell you, which basically is the complex one, which I want to pick up here. And suppose if we have a tool which ensures that daily somebody or daily or a particular periodicity somebody confirms it, and a CA certification need to be given once in a year and 2 years depending on the regulation. So we will not become with a surprise that some external party comes and basically review our compliance and we come with a surprise. So these tools will definitely help us in if we automate this whole process, help us beginning it by giving a trigger. Okay, you're supposed to do a, suppose I take an example, you're supposed to do a VAPT every 3 months for a web-facing application. So if you have to do, there's a trigger will go and you have to rectify and cure those VAPT basically vulnerabilities which you've identified. VAPT stands for vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So vulnerability you have to close within a month if it's a high. If it is a medium, it has to close in 2 months. If it is so on and so on. So even the compliance to cure it also can be tracked. So this is the complexity which we are dealing with. So that is one of the example I thought I just to highlight actually.
So Vikas, great point. I'll give you a couple of pointers there. We have dealt with these situations in the past. We built a whole element or a whole module of internal compliances in our product, where you can set up an internal compliance. You mentioned that once a month or once every 3 months, VAPT needs to be done for all your web applications. Now it's possible that you may have 5 web applications for which different owners are there. Those owners have a different structure. So you can actually create 5 line items in the product in the name of internal compliance. There can be a performer and reviewer and management structure. There can be a frequency, say in this case, a quarterly frequency. There can be a trigger date. There can be, reminders, alerts, notifications, and then escalations triggering off. It can be visible on people's dashboard as a non-compliant. So I think all of these things, when you start multiplying, you mentioned over 350 items that are just there in that one regulation. And there may be many such regulations that are there. And collectively, if you start adding the obligation, a lot of times, because you don't have the right systems, you will end up not doing a good job of managing the paperwork and frequency. There are certain regulations for which the government can ask you for paperwork going 10, 20 years back. I mean, there is no limitation of liability there as to for how long can you go back into the past and so on. So if you don't have strong document management system, and I think Parth mentioned they have already instituted a document management system. Every document that comes into the company has a document identification number so that it can be traced. You can take appropriate action. There is a backup and recovery. Chances are that 10 years ago, you may have stored some of your ECR challans on a hard drive of some laptop, which already crashed 2 times over. There was no backup. Guess what? There is a PF notice, and now you're not finding the base data to reconcile numbers against. And these are not funny examples. These are examples of real world. Customers face them all the time. And as I said, hope is not a strategy, right? If you're hoping against all odds that things will be in line, think again. Parth, any specific points on that before I take the next question?
No, I just want to highlight one thing. If you are in industry, for all the participants who are in industry, so if you are not compliant enough, I'm not just talking about the tick marks, from all the angles. The only people who will earn will be the bureaucrats and the consultants. So if those who are in industry should only focus on avoidance rather than cures.
Sure. Okay, moving on to the next question. We have an active audience today, and thank you so much for putting in so many questions. Parth and Vikas, I do want you to keep looking at the questions. One of the questions from Rohan is, gig economy is booming. How do you see the regulatory environment shaping these newfound self-employed individuals? Great question. Just throwing a couple of data points here. 91% of India's labor force today is in the informal sector. Only 9% of the labor force actually is in the formal sector. So the current codification exercise that began back in 2002, Parliament passed the code on wages in 2019, and then the other 3 codes, the industrial relations, the OSH, and so on in 2020, is paving the way for introducing regulations to bring in informal workers, gig workers, home-based workers, and all of them into the formal network. So chances are, as the rules get published, as some of these things become better understood, they will have access to social security benefits, including ESI and PF benefits. They will have access to some kind of pension benefits and so on and so forth, some kind of minimum wage plan. And what remains to be seen is the specific rules that will enunciate the details. But it's very clear that there is a recognition that 91% of your workforce, of our workforce, does not benefit from this, and a lot needs to be done. Specifics, I think, are currently in the works. I don't think they are available, but I leave Vikash and Parth to come in. Vikash, Parth, any comments on this gig worker question?
So I think the key thing which, to be honest, the government is implemented is from a social security and talk about is Aadhaar number. Because see, everything, if you see today, is getting linked to Aadhaar, being certain money transfers which are done by the government, considering from a pension to at the same time of COVID, when some money was given to farmers, to agriculturists, and all those things. So that one thing which government is monitoring everybody and basically forming the compliance regulations going forward is definitely basis the data and basic data analytics on this. One of data point which I can see is basically from financial services, the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Yojana or the Pradhan Mantri Jan Suraksha Yojana. So there is an uptake of more than 10 crores to 12 crore people in Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Yojana and 20 crores and more in the other 20 rupees scheme. So you can see, and all these people, if you see, are coming from every part of the India, including the remotest part of the country. So financial inclusion is the one way which the government is drive to understand the economy. If you see, a GST got implemented even with a zero rate, right? Why it was implemented? Because to gauge what is this unstructured or informal economy doing, right? So I think some of those parameters, the data points started collection has happened by the government of India. And it's a matter of time, I can see there's a regulation which already started coming and will come over the period of time. Because what we were missing earlier were data. I think now data with this GST and Aadhaar, I think is coming to the government very easily now.
Excellent. One question for Parth. What are the 2 to 3 takeaways to strengthen the culture of compliance? Especially you come from an industry which is labor intensive, both contract and full-time workers. What are your views?
Well, first of all, the management philosophy should be clear that this is a priority. It has to be done. Then it should be digitized. It should be online driven. It should be clearly spelled out. It should be delegated, and it should be included in your job description. So basically, very clear cut agenda. So you should have, in order to strengthen your compliance culture within the organization. And just a very small example I'll give, that when we deal with tax officers, we deal with bankers, we are highly capital intensive organizations, because the projects that we do are self-funded projects. So if it is a 1,000 crore project, we fund it through bank and equity, so through debt and equity. So basically, if you are the quantum of transparency that you can give to your stakeholders, that increases their confidence. So even it can happen to tax officers, it can happen to other bureaucrats who are dealing with, or if they are regulatory approvers. So the level of transparency, if you can portray to them, it becomes easier for them to trust you, and it becomes easier for them to then the next time when your application goes, it goes smoothly. So we understand that, and we try to imbibe in our team that transparency brings trust. So the culture should be, and don't be irritated by the queries and questions of the regulators or your stakeholders. Rather be more fluid, more transparent enough to answer everyone. Then it will become much more easier to you in the longer run.
Sure. 1 or 2 additional quick questions, and then we wrap up the conversation today. There is a question on how to choose the right compliance management software. Any views? I mean, I am interested party, so I'll refrain from answering that question. But if any one of you would like to start.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So basically, any tool which is browser driven, as I already told, it is a browser. It should be browser driven. There should be a dashboard within itself. There should be user rights and credentials management within itself. It should be most importantly available on a mobile app. The world is moving towards the cell phone. Everything and anything that we do should be available on a cell phone. So that is the way the communication is happening. And most importantly, the garbage in, garbage out concept. So if you have an organic team or an in-house team which can put in the masters and all the other checklists correctly, then it's fine. But otherwise, you need a tool which has experts do it for you. So that will ensure, because if the checklist is wrong, if your calendar is wrong, so ultimately the result will be wrong. So it is just, the computer is just a tool. So garbage in, garbage out concept. So yeah, so it should, the key takeaways that I thought I should share is this, that it should be mobile driven, it should be browser driven, it should be online, it should have the user rights and key correct inputs.
Vikash, any inputs from you?
Yeah, I think one or two things. I think Parth has covered maximum. So one or two things additional, which I can think is definitely if it can be integrated with our in-house systems, that will help us to continuously monitor it. And secondly, definitely should be foolproof. And I say foolproof means FOOL, foolproof, right? And which Parth also highlighted, that so that it should not become a garbage in garbage. It should not become just a conversion of a document into a digital format. It should be an intelligence system which should ensure that you should not get surprised any day, actually.
Very true, very true.
I would like to add one or two points here, which is the product should come integrated with India's regulatory compliance universe of 1,536 acts and 69,233 compliances, broken down by risk and criticality and highlighting items which can send an entrepreneur to jail. That's one point. Second point, India's regulatory environment is highly complex and dynamic, changes over 3,500 times a year. The product should come integrated with all the regulatory updates as a part of its core offering. So I think those are two additional points, Vikash and Parth. You mentioned the importance of staying on top of regulatory updates. I just thought I'll reiterate that. I just want to highlight the results of our poll today before we wrap up. Abhay, if you can bring up the results of our poll, that would be wonderful. Okay, so 49 people, 68% participated. 98% people agreed that technology-based systems are key to managing. So I think Parth was continuously talking about it. Parth, that's a validation of what you were saying. Manual and spreadsheet-based compliance management is not foolproof. I still am surprised to see that 10% of us believe that they are foolproof, but glad that 90% of them believe that technology solutions are helpful. Very difficult to stay on top of all the regulatory changes. 90% of us believe. I would like to learn from 10% what are they doing differently and see how we can bake some of that into our thinking. My organization has missed at least one critical compliance in the last 12 months. Over 50% have agreed to that. Over 50% agree that our senior management is not fully aware of the current status of critical compliance. Very important point, that sometimes the leaders are not fully aware. So greater degree of awareness, sensitization needs to be there at a leadership team. And I'm glad that, a number of people feel that way. The next item is we don't have a comprehensive list of all applicable compliances. 61% believe that. So imagine if that is the number, then there's no way you are going to stay on top of all your regulatory updates. And my organization has paid some fines and penalties. I was hoping to see zero here in agreed, but about 40% of us agree that they have paid fines and penalties. So as you can see, some interesting observations out there validates our view that compliance management is serious business. While it is not a revenue driver, one wrong step or one misstep can put you on the wrong side of the law. You can lose business, you can lose credibility, you can lose share prices in case you're listed companies. Cost of raising capital can go up. You can lose the confidence of your board, many other downsides that we don't think about. So think again, look at technology solutions to transform compliance for greater transparency and control. You've been a great audience. Thank you so much for joining in. Parth and Vikash, thank you so much for making the time and talking about your rich experience and sharing that with our audience today. We'll meet again.
Thanks, Rishi,
next
for
month.
having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.